Alright, I had a few things I wanted to go over. If you're thinking about buying an Amazon DSP van that's been auctioned off, a few things to look for and heavy wear items. First thing to check is heavy driver's seat wear. Gives you a much better idea of how much time it's spent stop and go, getting in and out of the vehicle. Look at the driver's seat belt. You can see you got real heavy wear on this one. You can tell it's been pulled in and out of the retractor an awful lot, and it doesn't retract all the way, which is not a problem in and of itself, but it's indicative of a lot of cycles of use here. The passenger seat doesn't really have any comparable wear, obviously. Some of the door latches and strike plates are going to take a lot of abuse from a lot of opening and closing. Another interesting part I saw on this one was the driver's door. Looks like probably the seat belt has been closed in the door hundreds of times. Took me a minute to figure out what all these indentations along the seam were, but another thing to keep a lookout for, even if it's not a big issue. Had some panels that were out of alignment that I've since realigned because a lot of these have been in some fender benders, so they're going to have some panel damage, or they're going to have replaced panels. A big deep scratch in the driver's side light, which I can sand and then buff out, but it's still worth mentioning. Missing logos. We've got both front and rear Mercedes logos are missing. Both driver and passenger rear view mirrors have seen heavy wear. I've cleaned this one up, but the frames are kind of coming apart, and notice the driver's side turn signal lens was full of water. I am missing trim behind the sliding door, which doesn't seem like a huge deal, but they're $120 a piece, so it's a pretty big deal when you just notice it's a little plastic piece of trim. Kind of a big one for me, the step that used to be here that they use along, that you'll see on all the vans, was welded very poorly to the frame, and mine has also maybe been in a fender bender on this side and had this panel replaced. But what it did was a fair amount of damage to the frame rail, or rather the pinch weld here at the bottom of the body. You can see these welds are all broken, and the step was really poorly welded on right here, and it actually bent this whole panel inward every time somebody stepped on it. So you can see there's quite a bit of strange, and this is after my grinding down some of the poor welds and beating some of this panel back into shape. They've actually welded some nuts here for, I can only assume, to add something else for structure, because there is nothing holding this step. So it's interesting. Nothing that's a huge deal, but certainly worth looking at when you get under a Sprinter van that you're purchasing at auction. Also had to weld a patch in right here because the step had torn through the metal. So about to clean all this up and pinch this back together and do some more welding. Otherwise, underneath, everything looks really good for mine. And mine was a Marietta market, so it didn't see any salt on the roads or anything like that. So minus the body damage, pretty good there. Another thing I learned while I was searching for these at auction was that most of them will repaint, they'll respray the whole van. Every one I looked at, I could see the weather stripping had paint on it, and you could tell it had been resprayed. And if you go inside the van, it's clear that this was the original Amazon Prime color, but to send them to the auction, they'll spend a few hundred or a couple $1,000s to get them resprayed, to get many more thousands of dollars at auction or after. Interior, now that I've removed all the shelving and the composite floor, is in excellent condition in mine. But another thing to watch out for, the B-pillars trim has been cut off really, really poorly. So looks like they probably used a reciprocating saw or a oscillating tool and just cut straight down the B-pillar on both sides. So again, not a huge deal, but if you were getting, depending on what you're planning for the interior build, I'm going to have to make this up with wood, because I'm certainly not going to spend the money on Mercedes parts for this. Other than that, almost no rust on the floor. A few areas I had to respray, but nothing big. Definitely want to watch for transmission wear, because they've had an awful lot of start and stop cycles. That's probably the number one thing. Mine shifts smoothly and is really good. 67,000 mile van, but it's had a hard life up until now. Got some missing seat trim and just lots of trash and junk everywhere that I've cleaned up. It's just, they're definitely not taken care of. They've had mirrors added. So this is aftermarket mirror. So you're gonna have generally a speed limiter and also an aftermarket mirror. Since there are no back windows, this is acting as your rear view mirror. Just kind of poor quality installation, not impressive mirrors, and evidently when you program out some of the auto locking features and such, you lose this, and I'll have to provide a new signal 12-volt ignition wire to power the mirror, but I haven't gotten that far yet. So other than that, that's pretty much what I've experienced so far. I had both tail lights were broken. I've since replaced them with some Amazon ones that are at least pretty decent looking on the surface, and that's where we are. So follow the channel if you want to see this thing get built. I've got a lot of plans for it. It's going to have retracting bed and solar and some full-on small camper home in here. So you guys have a good day.